Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammaṃ Sanghaṃ Namasami. I'd like to ask permission, take leave from Ajahn Dhammanando and the Theras, the Sangha here, the nuns and the lay people. Extend my greetings to all of you. And I'm happy to share a few words of Dhamma on this evening. It's one prat, we call it the one prat, the holy day. Prat literally comes from vara, venerable or worthy day. Observance day, Uposatha day, a kind of Uposatha observance, not the actual full moon or new moon, but one of our observance days when we traditionally come together, practice late into the night, whether it's late or all night, whatever, but it's a special day. And so by good fortune, kind of coincidence, unplanned, I'm here visiting the UK for a few days and come today, or yesterday. So it's an honor and a privilege to be invited to speak. Now, this is the season, of course, of visiting anyway, after the 3 months rains retreat, where there's been relatively little traveling, although in the West there's probably more than in Asia because it's the summer months. It's actually more traveling, sometimes things to do. But nevertheless, generally we haven't been moving around too much, and certainly monastic communities, we've had our stable period, as well as the winter retreat, of course. But now is the time for a special kind of visiting where we go to Kathina ceremonies. And all the years I've been in robes, I've never been in the West during this period, apart from the pansar I spent in Abhayagiri about 7 years ago. So this will be the first chance to actually attend, take part in a Kathina ceremony here in the West. So I've been helping look after my father, who's been sick this summer, and now it's a chance to visit the monasteries and reconnect with my Sangha friends, and head up to Harnham tomorrow for hopefully the first, and then maybe Chithurst next week if things work out. And so coming here today, very important, there's no Kathina, but to pay respects to Luang Por Sumedho. I didn't come in May, there was a big gathering here, time to pay respects on his 90th. But I always thought, look, if I can at some point come, of course, that would be lovely. And sometimes to come on a quieter time is in a way nicer, it's less busy. I heard the event was absolutely wonderful, and I saw some of it live streamed. I was in Thailand at the time, and in the monastery in Bun Lom, where many of you know Sister Jnana Siri is there. I was visiting my mum and we watched it, and here there was this sort of, we could see the Sangha sitting here facing that way, and listening to the talks and the anumodana before the meal, the reflection. You got a sense of what it was like, and having been here at the previous big gatherings, I had that feeling. But there was a special feeling, it being Luang Por's 90th, and those senior monks who even I in Thailand had never expected would be able to come. Some of them really didn't look like almost that they, would be making it through to the next year, let alone travel here. But the kind of the spirit and the willingness and the more than that, the real, you could say deep desire, in a wholesome way, the chanda, to come and take part in that event, literally brought them here. So to see them then here, together with the huge gathering of Western international Sangha, was very uplifting just to watch that. So missed out, but this time round managed to come, and today I had a lovely chance to pay respects to Luang Por. And that was special for, I know there have been a lot of reflections and sharings around how much Luang Por's touched individual lives, and he's touched all of your lives. But for me, certainly it's the same story. Like I met him, he asked me, did we first meet in Hanam? And that would have been in 1990. And I said, no, actually we met earlier in Thailand in 1989. And so going back, that's a really long time. And for somebody to be a constant in one's life, not necessarily living together, but a constant presence in terms of guiding, embodying guiding spirit, that's very powerful, very long time. And so obviously what comes is gratitude, deep piti, deep joy, and a real sense of genuine devotion, not in a culty personality type way, but just simple human way of this sense of you have to be devoted to something and someone to stick with it so long. So we share that, sort of sharing that devotion to Dhamma, but with these senior monks as the conduit or as the facilitator that gives us the chance to even dare to think that we can do it too. You need real life examples. I don't think the books or the ideal is really enough, or buildings don't do it. So to be able to sit there today, and again another occasion to kind of reminisce a bit about that, go back down and share some things was a very, very lovely occasion, very lovely chance. I'm very grateful for that. I got a souvenir picture and I will treasure that. I'm not a big fan of pictures, but this was one time I really asked to have one taken. And so that's a special reason for coming here today. But then I hadn't really thought, who's here and who am I going to see. But then, yesterday arriving, just by good fortune, as I walked in, there's kind of some bhikkhus on the left, some of whom I knew, some of whom I didn't know. And then in the car, there's Ajahn Chandasiri about to drive off, and Ajahn Sundara standing there. I didn't think, the nuns community have come out to greet me. I did realize that was a separate event. But Ajahn Chandasiri I met in 1990 as well, when I invited her to Edinburgh to give a talk at the Edinburgh Student Buddhist Group. She was visiting her parents in those days. So again, that's really, going back quite a long time, certainly in my life, and somebody who's been a part of that. So just to walk into a place and see somebody who's been a constant part of this constant theme. And then the bhikkhus, or even Ajahn Dhammananda was at his ordination. I was a student, I don't know, was it 91? Is that possible? 93, okay, a couple of years later. I was a student just before making the move myself, a couple of years before ordaining. So people and going to that ordination, seeing it down in Chithurst, definitely, I know as a part of my feeling was always, without daring to really almost even voice it to myself, let alone anyone else, was, could that be me one day, And so, and then seeing the Sangha, so many of the Sangha members here, without even, I'd forgotten, that Ajahn Rochana was here, I didn't know Ajahn Jivaka was going to be here, I didn't know Ajahn Chittavira was here. Suddenly walking in, these are really close, long-term friends. I remember Ajahn Rochana arriving from Nepal as a novice, and then monks who I've spent Pansa with in Dtailam, or who've been there on short term and taken dependence. So it's like a real family. And reminiscing today with Ajahn Sundara about her exciting adventures when I was a novice and she was visiting Thailand, going into this forest in Dtailam. So it just keeps kind of coming round and round to the fact that we have this shared life, although it's just different parts of the world and we're not so online and talking all the time and keeping up with the gossip. It's a lovely thing to more or less not see somebody and then suddenly walk into a monastery a year later or 2 years later, and there they are. Coming into Amaravati as well is always a little bit, I don't know about emotional, but again very powerful. I've hardly visited as a bhikkhu, 2 visits over the last 30 odd years, in 2014 and 2017. But again, just before ordaining, I did 2 retreats here in the retreat center, which looks pretty much the same. Of course, it's changed. It's been moved around a bit now, and the servery where we were today, taking our food, was the kind of like where we ate as retreatants. But again, it's a very powerful. These places have they're the key places in most of our lives. All of us sitting here, obviously we're here for that reason, because this place is, as a physical place, is forming part of that constellation of things which have been the causes and conditions on our journey. So the people, I think, are really important. Obviously the Dhamma itself, and then our own practice, but nevertheless the places, the retreat center or the Dhamma hall, the temple, maybe the field, somewhere where you've had an experience which allows you to think, like I say, to dare to even hope. Can I aspire to that? Can you aspire to that aspiration? Can you hope for that? To be on that path. And of course, you'll have heard it so often. I mean, it was very, very different in the 80s and 90s. Even before this temple was built, you came in and you really did know you were arriving in a kind of 1950s school, barracks, or 40s or whenever it was built, wartime even. It had that feel. But when you walked into the shrine room, then of course suddenly there were the familiar physical things, the physical settings. I remember coming, actually 89 as well, just after coming back from Thailand, and bringing some offerings for Ajahn Amaro that were sent from Luang Por Pasano. So again, little people who have been kind of part of the little jigsaw. It's like the glue that makes it all stick together, and it kind of comes full circle. And so this is the kind of really, really beautiful, I think, power of causes and conditions, or of making merit. You put the right causes and conditions into place, and I have this, you could say, full belief and full faith, and we all do. We've proved it for ourselves, that those causes and conditions do bear fruit, and they bear fruit in the right way. Generally, we don't always see it straight away, and it sometimes feels like we're doing so much of the right thing, but we're not quite getting the fruits, and it seems that some people do the wrong thing and they do get the fruits. But I think we generally all trust that in the bigger picture, in the bigger scheme of things, as you say, the arc of the universe does bend towards some kind of justice or some kind of righteous result, whereby good things do bring good results. The simple heart of the Dhamma. So we incline towards the Dhamma because we taste it, we feel it for ourselves. So today I've been able to share in the afternoon pictures, little slideshow, show and tell, and talk about Dtailam, this lovely monastery where I'm fortunate to be able to live. And again, I feel like the word Jau Awad literally means Lord of the Avasa, Lord of the dwelling, the owner, basically in Thai. Jau Kong Jau means the Lord or the boss. You never really, when you're living in a national park, you never really feel like you could possibly own it or be the boss or even in charge of it, because nature is definitely in charge. We had a flash flood 3 years ago and another one this year, and this washes out the roads, demolishes the trees. Even the mountain was beginning to come away. It looked like a landslide where we dug away to build a kuti, and because we dug it away too much, there's no natural retention anymore, and so there's this big crack forming above the kuti, the bamboo kuti, and so we couldn't use it for the rains. The monk had to move out because this crack, you could see it getting bigger, and if there was another really heavy rain, it could just suddenly seep into the earth and suddenly just be a landslide going down the mountain, and that's not a small thing. So nature is in charge, And so the word abbot or Jawawat doesn't really fit with a hermitage. It doesn't even really fit anywhere, it's just a name. But certainly all the more so in that kind of natural place. But it was very nice, sharing that, being able to show people pictures and explaining the lifestyle. And the animal, we got a trail cam which has been slowly capturing animal footage. Some of it quite remarkable footage, very endangered animals. And so to know that you're living with them is, of course, exciting, kind of fun in a way, but also deeply moving to know that the paths that you walk on are also trodden by these beasts, which have been there long before us and will be there long after us. And so it's also humbling, where in the same way that a bit of fear is humbling, getting wet on a monsoon night is humbling, being cold. We've all, the monks who've been there know what I mean, but here as well you have that same feeling. When you're on Tudong or you're walking, or just in your kuti sometimes, it's not like it was before, that we have so much control over our lives. So to be able to share that is obviously a joy, and I just feel like I'm being a like a facilitator or a guardian or a caretaker for something which we've inherited. We inherited it when I came from Ajahn Jayasaro, was leading the way in the Tudong. Before that, Lumpur Pasano, who set it up. But really, the tradition of the what we call the Kruba Ajahn, or the Thai forest tradition, the meditation masters, and then all the way back. It's a lineage all the way back to the days of the Buddha, when the monks and nuns lived on what's called Jarika. Jarika is the wandering. We didn't call it Tudong. Tudong is a bit of a shift in emphasis. The Tudonga observances are really the things like eating in our bowls and these kind of more like practices. But the word for wandering, living a wandering peripatetic life, was jarika, literally to wander. But also then that entails living at the root of a tree, living out in the open. It often dovetails into the Tudonga observances. And these are the things which, very much at the heart of our holy life, of our training. And so essentially I always think of all of us as young monastics, some of us not so young in terms of age, but essentially still young in terms of beginners, kind of beginners on the path, or early days, or definitely much to be done. And so to come and to, connect so very easily, because we have these shared principles, what we call the Korwat, what we call the Vinaya, but more than that, on the Dhamma level, just our shared monastic aspiration. The aspiration is not so much a monastic aspiration, like, I want to be a monk or I want to be a nun per se for the sake of it, but the calling is to for something you could say higher, or we want to develop ourselves to realize some truth, and the monk and nun is the form which we choose. So one of the things, talking to Lumpur Sumedho today, he will almost always come back to the very simple theme of the Four Noble Truths, and just the beauty and the simplicity of it, and how in his novice year, using a book, a very simple collection of teachings by the great early German pioneer Jnana Tiloka, who went to Sri Lanka in the beginning of the 20th century. So you can imagine what it was like leaving the West 100 years ago and coming to Asia. Some people struggle to do it now, or it was difficult in the 70s when the first generation monks went to Wat Pah Pong to train with Lumpur Cha. But that long ago, to have that kind of faith and that kind of vision, to be inspired by the Dhamma and then think, I'll do that, I'll go there and try that, and how simple and how alien South Asia, Southeast Asia would have been then. And quite remarkable. So I think we sometimes forget the debt of gratitude to those early, somehow many German monks, Jnana Tiloka and Jnana Ponika, who were very much the pioneers of the early Westerners who came to Asia. And then, of course, because they studied and learnt the Pali and then had a background in study, were able to gather together in a very systematic way the teachings. And although they were, generally there was this high level of study and depth of study, you have a book like The Word of the Buddha, which simplifies it around the Four Noble Truths and just an expansion of that. So everything we need to know is essentially in there. And so Luang Por, again today, talking about how basically that was the thought that arose was to take this amazing principle and more or less put it to the test. Does it work? And so, again, it's the same for all of us. That's, I think, what we're doing. We have this shared theoretical and certain experiential understanding of the Four Noble Truths, but really our lives is a test. We're testing it out. We're saying, well, does this theory, does this perspective really hold true? And there's only one way to really find out, is to really put it into practice, in all its facets, which is the whole expansion, or the implications of the Eightfold Path, and particularly Satipatthana, Samma Sati, and the Four Right Efforts, Samma Vayama. And so, again, we're leading this life which is imbued with faith, but essentially looking into constantly these simple principles. The principle of craving, it all hinges around craving, and we can just see that in our lives coming up again and again, and seeing where we're being pulled and pushed, where there's motion towards and motion away from. And so this journey that we're all on, investigating the Four Noble Truths in all these various different, very, very different ways, different forms. I mean, we can do it whether we're helping parents at home or building big monasteries or living in hermitages. The thing I said at the end when I was with the community this afternoon was, although I'm in a forest dwelling and trying to, keep that lifestyle alive, I in no way feel, I've never said that, this is the real practice, or this is the way, or this is essential. It forms part of a much, much bigger whole, the bigger picture for us. It's just we're fortunate to still have those kinds of places, and things like, the winter retreat, that idea of hunkering down and stopping and turning inwards is, again, another part. But we wouldn't do that all the time, in the same way that we wouldn't have, hopefully, building projects all the time, but we understand that, we have to do it, that we have maintenance all the time. I think that's a given. But these things form, part of the path. And at the heart of the path really, well, there's so many ways you could sum it up, so many words which encapsulate it, but obviously for us as monastics, it's renunciation. But I think as lay people, it's the same as well. Any aspect of our Dhamma practice will be rooted in renunciation. You take the precepts, it's veramani, it's to abstain from. So right from the very beginning, it's an abstention from doing certain things, how it manifests in our lives. That's the very way it starts. But if bit by bit we see that more and more renunciation is like an acquired taste. When we see that less really is more, or the more we let go, the lighter we feel. You put down heavy bags and you feel at ease. You don't get anything from that. The ease and the happiness comes from the putting down. So that simple simile, or that image, the only question is really how far can we take it? And of course, it's becoming a thing in certain circles, this kind of idea of minimalist living, People are trying to reduce their carbon footprints, and people really understand it. Even celibacy, monastics understand it, and there's sort of voluntary celibacy, and all kinds of people coming towards the idea of renunciation as something which brings joy, sort of the joy of missing out rather than the fear of missing out. These kind of ideas are not alien in the world these days. But really to take it on, of course it's hard because the stream is not so supportive, and of course within oneself it is very difficult to maintain that spirit because of the power of craving and our conditioned need to gratify our senses or to gratify our cravings. And just the extent to which craving itself is addictive. It's so hard to get out of that addictive cycle when craving itself seeks craving, the excitement, the allure of the search, even when we know the object and the result will ultimately let us down. There's something that nevertheless binds us to the searching. So this renunciation is never going to be easy, in the sense it's never going to be for the masses. It's never going to be a kind of majority, I think. But for those of us that are drawn towards it, whether it's through being inspired by people, by places, our own reading, by teachings like the Buddha, understanding the Four Noble Truths, that essentially the second noble truth, that the only reason we'll experience dukkha is because of our cravings. And then, of course, the thought that there could be a freedom from that. That's something which, again, is like an acquired taste. We have to keep going into it, keep going into it, and keep going into it. And so we always feel, because for most of us, there's this feeling there's still, you could say, a long way to go if it's a simile of a journey, but nevertheless we can kind of encourage each other. And so to come here today and to be asked to speak, to be asked to share something about Thailand, it's very uplifting, and also personally, like I say, to kind of every time I come back to Amaravati, like to come full circle again where it began a bit, and also tomorrow to be driving up to Hanam, which was the monastery I used to visit as a student, studying in Edinburgh. Hanam was the local monastery. So we had a group and we would go down there for work days. They were beginning to build the Dhamma hall. It was very cold, and beginning to do the building on the Dhamma hall, and to see the transition. The abbot, Ajahn Prabhakaro, has now left and disrobed. Ajahn Munindo came, and to sort of be part of that kind of history. So it comes full circle to go back there. The monk I ordained with, Ajahn Punyo, to see him. It's a very special thing, and I feel very very lucky, again, to have certain constants in my life in terms of people. But I'm sure all of you stay in robes 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20. That's exactly how it is. So you can really have trust and take heart that at the very least, to be part of a community like this, these are things which are guaranteed virtually as long as you stay around. That sense of kalyana mitta, that sense of support, and that sense of refuge, your home away from home. I no longer have a family home in England, in London, where I grew up. My family's a bit all over the world, and I never really felt actually it was much of a refuge anyway. But somehow then coming to the Sangha, coming to the Triple Gem, you find a different kind of home in this holy life, in this homeless life. And so the people who are your teachers, your mentors, are the Devadutas, the heavenly messengers. We have old age, sickness and death, but the samanas, the sight of a samana. And that's something which is very rare. And so this is what we call the Kathina season, the time of visiting. Of course, it's a time of merit making for the lay people, and merit making for the monastics. It's highly meritorious, or meritorious in the sense that it brings great joy and a kind of enrichment to our lives to do these ceremonies. They're not at all hollow ceremonies, and it marks the passage of time as well, which, as you know, is just incredibly fast. It's already 1 week after the end of the rains, and Kathina season upon us very soon. Like in a blink of an eye, we'll be preparing for the winter retreat, and then preparing for next Vasa. So that's a fact. All of us can attest to that. So when we have this reflection that the days and nights are relentlessly passing, as well as the merit side of things and the goodness side, the happiness side, we do always have to have this reflection of how well are we spending our time. Generally, it's really good, but there's always that that thought in mind that, you know, this is precious. Not only this human life is precious, but time is precious. So I've been speaking about a few themes: and gratitude, a sense of coming back, coming home, paying respects to senior monks, and the Sangha have been part of my life. But essentially, it all just hinges, or it all just revolves around the Four Noble Truths. And that's been, I think, the value. If I would say one thing I appreciate above all, being part of the Luangpo Cha tradition and having Luangpo Sumedho and other teachers who stick to this framework and stick very, you could say nicely, simply, but quite correctly to this footprint of teachings, as the Buddha's, the elephant's footprint, the Four Noble Truths. We saw picture of an elephant footprint, because today it is a very large footprint. All the teachings of the Buddha can fit inside it. The Four Noble Truths is in there. Heedfulness is in there. And that's essentially all the Buddha taught. He said, monks, formerly and now I teach one thing: suffering and the end of suffering. And so that's what Luangpo got from Luangpo Yai, the big Luangpo, Luangpo Cha, who he studied with, is the Four Noble Truths, and to investigate and go into our suffering. And this wonderful saying of Luangpo Cha's, that where your suffering is, that's where your happiness lies. And where your happiness is, that's where your suffering lies. It lies hidden, it's lurking. It just has to change. When your suffering changes, happiness arises in its place, just as light dispels darkness. Where there's darkness, that's where the light will be. And exactly where the sky is light and bright, that's where in no short time darkness will be found. So Luangpo Cha was pointing us in that direction. Look into our dukkha. And he was saying it in simple terms, in the same way that the Buddha said it, that dukkha parinyayanti should be fully understood. The Buddha never said dukkha should be abandoned. The causes should be abandoned, but dukkha, suffering, has to be fully understood. It's a subtle difference. And so our teachers, luckily, just keep, I don't want to say ramming it home or emphasizing it, but just keep repeating it, keep reminding us of it, keep pointing to that and expounding it. And that's just quite right, in the same way that a sports trainer just keeps emphasizing what the sports person needs to do, or a doctor keeps emphasizing health and the essentials of good health. So too the Buddha's teaching is all about this. So in this world which is increasingly confusing and polarized and all of these things, and it's wonderful for us to keep our focus simple and clear. It's not a narrow-minded perspective. Actually, it's a very broad one, because the principles of suffering is just so wide, because suffering manifests in so many different ways. There's so many ways we can look at it and find our happiness in so many different ways, wherever that suffering or that soka, parideva, dukkha, domanassa can be understood and alleviated. So I'd like to express deep thanks then to everyone. I should have maybe said it first, but I'll say it now, for the really warm welcome, particularly warm, seeing so many friends, and that sense of you arrive in a place and you feel at home straight away. people you don't know, you get to know very quickly, people you met once or twice many years ago, maybe as anagarikas, now they're bhikkhus, or you've got anagarikas and anagarikas that I knew when they were laymen in Thailand, lay women, kind of forgotten about, and oh, here you are, and how's it going? And oh, great, you're on the path, keep going, you know, step by step, day by day. Only one mistake you can make is stop practicing or give up the path. All the other mistakes are, almost all are rectifiable, but you give up the path, then it's really difficult. So just to say thank you to everyone, and wish you all the best for this upcoming Kathina season, winter, next year's retreat, and all of your holy lives, your journey, and the lay people, your journey towards hopefully and progressing in Dhamma. So I'll end there.